curating our collection. Do I sound like an ADHD crafter? Because I am. There's a word I'm trying to find in my brain and I can't find it. How many of you have either heard the words or said the words, "I'm so bored, there's nothing to do," when in fact you have a closet full of things to do? Or if it were your children who said it, they have a room full of toys and activities to do. Today, I'm going to help you with that. At least I'm going to try. Many of you may be doing No Buy 2025, and if you are, good for you. I'm doing it as on a limited basis. Certain categories are no buy, and one of those categories are art and craft supplies as much as possible. And I know as crafters and artists, it's really, really hard to resist the latest thing, whatever that might be, or to be sparked with that little dopamine hit of going to the craft store or the fabric store and getting stuff for a new project. But then No Buy 2025 comes along and we're challenged. Well, what am I going to do? I'm so bored. I want to do something. Well, here's my challenge for you. Shop your stash. Get in there and see creatively what you can do with what you already have. Now, if you've been with me for a little while, you know that I am all about trying to clear out all the stuff I have and use it. It's been a theme of mine since moving here to my new old house and starting my life over again and moving a bunch of stuff twice. And I have accumulated a lot of things over the last few decades as an artist and a creator and a sewist mainly. So I have a lot of videos out there of shopping my stash and coming up with new projects with what I already have. So this is my advice to you, especially maybe if you've been in the same place for a while and you have a closet much like this. So if you have a space like this and you haven't seen the back of it for a while, my number one piece of advice is to pull it all out. Take a weekend and just pull it all out so you can see what you have. You might be surprised. So you may find materials, supplies, unfinished projects that you put aside for whatever reason, they no longer sparked joy. Pull those out. Take a second look at them. Can you quickly or can you finish them up in the way they were originally intended and have that one more space in your closet that you didn't have before? Can you, if it really is something you're like, I don't know why I thought I wanted to make this, but I don't like it. Well, if it's a yarn project, can you frog it and reuse the yarn in a different way? Or can you make pillow covers out of that partially finished Afghan? Many different things. And another related to that, if you find yourself like I did in one of my most recent videos, I pulled all my fabric out and all my patterns out and went through them all and matched them up and put them on a shelf. And actually, I have to say that was very successful for me. I've already completed 3 projects from that little exercise. And because the pattern, the fabric, and well, the ones I did really didn't have any notions like buttons or zippers, but I have some in the pile that do. If all of that is put together, when I have a free moment, a free afternoon to come in and sew, all I have to do is pull that off the shelf and get started. So maybe you're not a sewist, maybe you don't, make garments, but you can bundle your projects together in baskets, bins, bags, whatever works for you. If it is a project you can take with you different places, a more mobile type project, then put it in something you can carry with you and move it around the house, move it from place to place. If you spend a lot of time in your car waiting for your kids or something, take that with you. Now, once you have all your stuff out, if you're just looking to organize it, then put like with like. You know, all your fabric, all your yarn, all your painting supplies. Do I sound like an ADHD crafter? Because I am. That's just 3 categories. There's embroidery. There's so much more, so much more. Anyhow, back to my topic. That's one way to organize things, and it's a great way to organize things, and especially if you work in that way. But here's my creative tip for once you get everything out. Take a look at it. And maybe if you have sketchbooks or journals that you kept projects in, pull those out and look through them as well. Because maybe you can take the materials, the medium from one craft or art and combine it in a new way with something else. Or use the skills you learned over here together. So if you have bins and bins and bins of yarn, say, then maybe you can use that yarn in your slow stitching, your hand stitching, your embroidery. You can couch it on, you can do some things. Another video I have coming out is trying new things. And these two, I almost made these as one video. Actually, I did, and then I didn't like it. So there'll be another video about trying new skills and learning new skills and how to go about that. So maybe you can say, oh, look at all this yarn I have. I've always been interested in weaving, and you can try that. So that would segue into the other topic that I will talk about in another video. I have recently begun playing with watercolors again, because when I cleaned everything out and was moving it from one room to the other, one closet to the other, I found all my watercolor supplies, and every time I've tried to do watercolors, I've failed miserably. I decided to give it another go because I've seen inspiration that I was like, oh, maybe I'll go that way with it. One thing I'm excited to try with my watercolor isn't necessarily combining the two things, but taking inspiration from one and using it, crossing them over. And that is using my slow stitch fabric collage as inspiration for my watercolor. And eventually maybe the watercolor will translate into some of my slow stitching, some of the color combinations I come up with or textures I come up with, and use those too. There are also books up on my craft bookshelf up here about Zentangling, which I did a decade or so ago and got a little obsessed with. I could use those Zentangle patterns to embellish my watercolors, and maybe they'll inspire some stitching as well. So see where you can combine some different things. Now there's one other area of my collection, if you will. I think collection is a better word than stash. Yeah, I think I'm going to start using collection. So instead of stash busting, where there's a word I'm trying to find in my brain and I can't find it. Curating our collection a little better. How about that? Instead of stash busting. That just sounds, I don't know, I don't like it. I mean, I use it all the time, but I think curating my collection is a better way. But anyhow, now that I've come up with that, there's another area of my life that, in my collection, that I have decided to try curating a little more. So let's go take a look at that. So the next category of creative stash busting, if you will, is your books. And I am not going to tell you to get rid of one book. Just put that out there right at the beginning. I love my books. I have gotten rid of a few of them because I've moved quite a bit. But no, what I'm talking about here is using what you have, just like all your craft supplies. Take a look at your bookshelves, and see if you're like me, that there are many, many books on these shelves that I've read part of, and the bookmark is halfway through the book. So there's a lot of those. Or I've accumulated, or acquired is maybe the better word for it, and have put on the shelf and never gotten around to reading. So my plan for 2025 is to regularly come to my bookshelves and either randomly pick a book, which is what I did last week, that I knew I hadn't read yet or I had started and put down, or to come in here and go, what am I in the mood for and what do I have? And how I am going about this, well, obviously the ones I've never read. That's kind of a no-brainer. Read them. Just read them. The second category of books that I'm going to de-stash without getting rid of, but I guess use up my stash or use it, are, and I have most of the books on my shelves, are what would be considered nonfiction. There's a few that might be kind of self-help nonfiction, but not in the typical Dr. Phil kind of self-help way. Yeah. So I have a lot of nonfiction books. And many times when I read these books, and many of these books have exercises or journaling prompts, that kind of thing in them. And as I'm reading the book for the first time, I'm just reading through it, but I'm not putting into practice what I am reading. So that's one category, is to grab some of these books and actually do the work that's outlined in them, or take notes on them. And we'll get more to that in a second. The second category of books that I have a few of, well, some I have anyway, that I have on my shelf, are old favorites. Where's my favorite of all favorites? Down here on my fiction shelf. Larry McMurtry's Lonesome Dove is probably one of the best written fiction books I know that I've ever read, and I know a lot of other people feel the same way. This is not my original copy, although this one has gotten a little water damage somewhere. I think I also have it in ebook form because it's a chunky book to carry around, but I don't know what happened to my original copy that I bought back in the 90s probably. Anyway, I'm not going to... This is not a book review book, but if you haven't read Lonesome Dove, even if you don't like Westerns, if you like good character development and story, read this book. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. Trying not to turn this into a book talk. But I have a number of books that I have read in the past and maybe have reread. Anyway, there are certain books that I have read more than once, which is unusual for me. It's got to be a really good book for me to want to read it more than once. But if it's a really favorite book, it's still on my shelf. So another category of books for 2025 that I want to de-stash, I'm using that term, but it's not really if you have a better term for me, put it in the comments, are the old favorites, and to go through them again. And in the kind of a subcategory of old favorites are books from my youth, or maybe even my children's youth, that I want to, again, revisit. And I've done that recently with a few books, but again, I'm not going to get into details and actual books reviews. So those are two ideas of way if to approach your bookshelf. If you've just got this dusty collection of books on your shelf and you don't want to get rid of them, revisit them. They're old friends. Or if you've got a bunch of books that you've purchased and not even ever, or were given, crack the cover of, it's time. This is your signal that it's time to get to your bookshelf and see what's there. And two other things that I'm going to add to this that have helped my book reading journey. One, I have been keeping a book journal, and I keep it next to my bed because it's where I do 90% of my reading. And when I finish a book, I write it in there, the name of the book and the author. That's all I put in there. And I have it broken, each year I start a new pages eventually. And then every month I just put a new, put February. And then as I finish a book in February, I write it down. Pretty logical stuff. So at the end of the year, I can count up how many books I've read. I can see what months are my good reading months and which ones are my slower reading months. Not that it matters, just data accumulation. Also, I can go back if someone recommends a book and I'm like, that sounds familiar. I have a really bad memory sometimes, or I read a lot of books consecutively and I don't remember the title or the author. I can go back and say, oh yeah, I did read that Kate Quinn book or that whoever book. Or if I'm looking for a new book, I can go and look for an author that if I've read more than 2 of their books, then I'm pretty sure I like that author, and I can go back and see if I can find more by them. In addition, what I have just started, and I don't know which one to grab as an example, often, especially my nonfiction books, and ones that I know I'm going to keep, I write in them, I highlight them, I underline things. I know some of you book purists are gasping and clutching your pearls because you write in books. Yeah, sometimes I even turn the corner down if I can't find a piece of paper to use as bookmark. So, sue me. Anyhow, but then the book goes back on the shelf and I'm not, unless I'm going back to visit that book. What I have begun to do is have another little journal, and I could put it in the same journal as my recording of books journal, but just for I found another journal that I liked and I had it at hand, and that's what I'm using it for. I have started a journal that as I'm reading a book, if something strikes me that I want to remember later, I jot it down in this book so that I can go back and flip through it and just inspiration, things like that. Again, I organize it with, as I'm reading the book, I put the title of the book and the author at the top of the page, and then I put the page number that I found that particular quote on. And then if I'm going back to it later, I can find the quote easily in the book and maybe get some further context for it. Now, if you are not a paper journal person, pen and paper type person, and no judgment, a lot of people, especially those a little younger, but not necessarily, like everything digital. And so you can do all that same thing digitally. You can keep notes on your phone. You can make a spreadsheet of your books that you read every year. If I were doing a spreadsheet, I probably would add more categories. I would rate it. I would maybe take a few notes about the characters or the plot line or something like that. So again, later I can go back, which book was that had so-and-so as the character, or was set in this place, or this time, historical time or something like that. Then that would be great. But I know I won't get my computer out or my tablet or my phone and keep it updated. A little journal next to my bed is the way that works for me. So whatever works for you. So that is my 2025 plan for use it or lose it kind of thing, or using my stash, basically. Not necessarily getting rid of the stash, but like I've said about my craft supplies and my sewing supplies, I would rather have this information in my brain than sitting here unaccessed on my shelf. So while the physical space that the books are taking up will not diminish or be transferred elsewhere from fabric to garment or something like that, it's still being transformed into information stuck between two covers, into hopefully information in my brain that maybe I will retain at some point. So that's just another little idea. So I hope that this was an inspiration for you to access the information that is right here for you if you have a large library like I do. Now, these bookshelves do not include my art and craft books. They're mostly sewing books and things, and pattern books are on a shelf in the sewing room. But if you have a large collection of them as well, do the same thing. Pull one off the shelf, challenge yourself to find something in it that you're going to do. And you don't have to follow the pattern exactly as it is in the book, but use it as inspiration. Perhaps this is an embroidery book, but since I'm working on being better at watercolor painting, maybe I could take an inspiration of these allium flowers as example and use them as an inspiration for a watercolor painting. That's your second book challenge related, that brings everything together related to using our craft supplies and using our book supplies. I'm hoping that today, by sharing some of the ways that I have curated my collection or stash bust, I have inspired you to give it a try, maybe try some new things and new combinations, and get in there and see what you have and see what new things you can do with them, because if you do, you will never say, I'm bored, there's nothing to do, or I have no supplies, I have to go to the store and buy more things, or, get on my phone and order some things. You know what I'm talking about. Because there is a saying that I have heard many times that says, she who dies with the most, fill in the blank, yarn, fabric, paper supplies, scrapbooking stuff, wins. No, I am here to tell you that the saying should be, she who lives a creative life, finding joy every day, making things, is the real winner. Winning. We're winning here. Thanks for being with me. This has been fun. I'm having fun just seeing what I have and making it work. Thanks for being with me. Peace out. Love you lots. Take care of yourself. Bye.